Are you ready to learn the 3 secrets to launching a successful podcast? Hi, I'm Bill, a recent client of the Podcast Mogul. If you've been thinking about starting a podcast but aren't sure where to begin, he's got you covered. He is hosting a free webinar where he will share the 3 secrets that can help you launch, grow, and monetize your podcast without any fancy equipment or technical headaches. Click the link in the show notes to save your spot now and let him help get your podcast off the ground.
You're listening to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast, brought to you by Phil Better, Inc. If you want to take your podcast to the next level, make sure you book your free 15-minute call with Phil Better, the Podcast Mogul, at www.philbetterinc.com. Welcome back to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm blessed to have Maria Daniels on. An incredible, successful, chaotic entrepreneur. Those are her own words, not mine. I'm going to give her a chance to introduce herself. So, Maria, please introduce yourself to my audience. Tell them a bit about yourself.
I think that's perfect. I think successful and chaotic really encompasses who I am, which is why that's my show's name, because, my life is chaos. I tell that to everybody. My life is complete chaos, and most people's are. Our own flavor of chaos is a little different, and mine's quite flavorful, let me tell you. But, we all really want the same thing. We all want to be successful. And, my big thing in my own journey has been trying to figure out, what does that word success mean to me? Because for a long time I was chasing somebody else's idea of success, and it's not what it meant to me. And I didn't realize that for a long time. And I figured out a lot of people kind of have to go through that same journey, that, depending on how we were brought up and the examples that we've seen, that's how we form our first idea of success. And then it kind of goes from there to figure out, what do we want from it? How do we define success? And, I don't think it's like a destination that you get to that you finally figure it all out, but I do know a lot more than I did when I first kind of started this journey, for sure.
Yeah. And you've launched a couple companies now. You have, you have your building that you're in, because we've talked a bit and working together. You have the building has a cafe in it. You have meeting places, you have a podcast studio that you rent out, plus on top of it you run your marketing business and your podcast production business out of it as well. So yeah, you have your hands in a lot of pies.
I do, and I have a wellness company as well, so that's kind of a whole other that's a whole other thing.
I wasn't aware of that.
No. Yeah, I have a wellness company. Honestly, I have more experience in the wellness world than I do in the marketing and business world. I've only been in the marketing and business world, started in 2008. But before that, I've been in the wellness world for more than 20 years at this point. So I have more experience in that. I was a personal trainer back in the day. I still technically am. I always say that. People are like, well, aren't you still a trainer? Well, you don't unbecome a trainer. I just don't actively work as a trainer anymore. I work as an integrative nutritionist. I'm a nutritionist, so I work with people more on the nutrition side of things. And I will give people a basic workout plan, but I don't work in the gyms or anything of that anymore. I have a background in MMA. I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and kickboxing, for a while, and I ended up fighting a couple of times, low level, nothing much. I always tell people, intelligent people don't like getting hit in the face very much. So I quit doing that and kind of transferred over to training other fighters.
I'm smart. I'll train you to be a good fighter. You can take the punches.
That's about how it went, which I ended up with still a lot of injuries, because you get a lot of injuries in training even, especially since most of my clientele were men. So, they outweighed me by quite a bit. But, it was a good time. I love my wellness world, but I found out accidentally that I was very good at marketing, because I was having to market myself all the time. And when I was married before, because I've been divorced. So I've been married twice now. I have a total of 7 kids, 4 from my first marriage and 3 from my second marriage. And when I got divorced, I was working as a trainer, which was great second income. And it was not a great, let's raise 4 kids by yourself, Maria, income. So that's how I ended up in marketing. And I think a lot of people are kind of surprised to learn that, because it wasn't this, I've always dreamed of marketing. And I just, this is where my heart is leading me. It had nothing to do with that. It was like, shit, I need to make some more money. How can I do that and do that quickly? It was like, I need money like now, like yesterday. So I was like, well, I'm constantly, having to market myself because I was doing all my own boot camps, all the marketing for that, all this stuff. So my goal at first was I went to American Marketing Association and got certified there, for marketing, digital marketing specifically. And I was going to market myself out to other, trainers and, gyms and stuff. Yeah, that was the first goal. So that was the first goal. So I was like, I'm going to go and I'll just do their stuff. This is how I make some money. But then I got hired on by a marketing company, and I took more certifications in different classes specifically towards businesses. Ended up, doing some business management college classes, and I don't know, I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the business aspect of it. It wasn't something I'd ever been, I guess, exposed to. My family was not business owners. My family was blue collar, it wasn't something I ever knew. It wasn't even something I ever imagined I could do, because to me, I thought you had to, get out of school, go to college, graduate college, get a good job, work there, 30 plus years. And if you were lucky and had enough money, then you could start your business with what you had earned during that time. I literally thought that was how it went, like every single time. I didn't even realize that there was another way of doing it. So that kind of, I started meeting more people whenever I worked for this marketing company, and I started seeing a different way of doing things I had never been exposed to. And, kind of looking back, where I worked, for myself doing training, I've been a quote unquote business owner for a long time, but I didn't count it as that. I was working freelance. I was marketing myself, all day long, but I didn't count that as a business until later when I realized what true entrepreneurship is. And, I realized, oh, well, I've been an entrepreneur this whole time, but I didn't even realize it, because I didn't understand that terminology. I didn't understand that that was a word. And, that being able to kind of be exposed to these different ways of doing things, it literally changed my life. And, it's been a journey for sure. It's not like I, had it all figured out right away. I fell on my face a lot, and I made a lot of stupid choices, and like a lot of people do, that's how you learn. If you don't have somebody telling you don't do this, and you're like, oh, that looks cool, let me do that, and you do it anyway, you found out really fast, is that a good decision or a bad decision? But, I honestly think for me, that's the best way of learning. I don't know that even if somebody had come and told me, I don't know that I would have listened. I would have been like, well, let me try it for myself, type of thing.
That independent streak is very
absolutely
strong. Similar to the stories you were telling just before we went on air about being a Monday child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Stubborn goes way back.
Now, you jumped into the marketing world because it was a necessity, and then you fell in love with it, which is something a lot of entrepreneurs do. They find their passion, and then they've just build their business around it. And now you've helped multiple businesses grow their business, and you've decided to branch off. And you were telling me while we were working together that you've been building a case study for 5 years regarding the building that you bought and you retrofitted. What are your plans with that? Like, why were you doing such a huge experiment that could have ended up failing, but it looks like it's going to be through the roof success?
Well, first of all, it was 3 years, not 5.
3, sorry.
But that's fine. No, that's fine. It's been 3 years so far. But, I have fell in love with this building whenever I first moved to this area. So I live in a small little rural area in southern Ohio in the States. And I've always driven by, this is an old bank, I've always driven by and been like, I just love that building. I have a thing for historical buildings anyway. And when this building became available, I actually had been working up toward the city, just because honestly, I had started my business out of my house, like a lot of people do. Started out of my house. I even built an office that I should have soundproofed. That's another story for another day. But I figured out really fast with, a full, busy, child-filled house that my home office was causing a lot of issues. So I had been thinking about getting an office outside of my house. And I started doing a lot of business up toward the city because I knew people from the city. In rural areas, it's hard to get businesses started because there's not a lot of resources available. So like a lot of other people, I turned towards the city to be able to build my business. And I remember whenever this building became available, I was like, you know what, I could move my office there. But the only problem with that is the fact that where I said that there's no resources available for small businesses. So I came with this idea. I was like, well, what if I created this business hub? So in a lot of cities, you see, co-working areas, you can see places where people can teach workshops. There's a lot of places to go to have a meeting, lots of workshops to tap into, lots of resources to tap into. And once you get into the smaller areas where there's no jobs, and there's a reason there's no jobs is because a lot of businesses can't sustain themselves there, very easily. You have almost this like desert, it's everything desert. It's a food desert. It's a business. It's like there's nothing there, but yet there are people there who are needing all these things. So I came up with this concept, and everybody thought it was a terrible idea. I kept saying it, how I downloaded in my brain. I'm like, I just think this would work. Why wouldn't this work? If you know that there's people in that area, there's people that have small businesses already. They're running them out of their homes like I was, or they're having to drive an hour and a half to the city like I was. In my mind, I could think of what if you was to tap into the same idea of what they're doing in the city, but on a smaller scale, and be able to have these resources available to the rural areas to be able to allow them to get the resources they need, tap into the resources they need to be able to help their business thrive and survive and then thrive, So that was kind of the concept, which, again, everybody thought was a terrible idea. Well, I am on a committee, small business committee for the state of Ohio's chamber. It's in our state capital, which is Columbus, Ohio. And it's funny that I'm the only person on that committee that's from a really small town. Like, a lot of people are like, well, I'm from a small town. But I'm like, how many people's in your town? No, that's not a small town. And
when
some of these,
on your one hand, that's
exactly.
A small town.
Exactly. I'm like, we have one stoplight and that's it. So a lot of these things that they would throw out as suggestions to drive economic growth, I'm like, that's not going to work there. And, that's not going to work there. And I just kept seeing this gap, which just kind of furthered my idea that something like this was needed. But again, everybody's thinking it's a terrible idea. My husband even thought it was a terrible idea. My mom thought it was everybody thought it was a terrible idea. So I, ended up doing it anyway, because again, Monday's child, I do what I do. And I'm like, I just think this is going to work. And, I dove into it, and like a lot of other things, I did not know fully what I was biting off. I had never renovated an old historic building before. And I had my moments where I was like, I should have listened to everybody. This is a horrible idea. Because I felt like Tom Hanks off the Money Pit, where you fix one thing and 5 things over there just broke. And, I'm funding it out of my pocket, and my pockets only have so much funding. And I'm freaking out about how I'm going to finish this project on, this shoestring budget. But I was dead set I was going to do it, because my concept of this building was that if there was to be a business hub in all of these small towns, that we could get grants established for in the future, that would help to drive that economic growth and allow for small businesses to be able to have somewhere to go for a meeting, to grab a bite to eat, to have their meeting, to be able to take classes, courses, network, all the things. So I wanted to do it out of my pocket. I was very tempted on, I had a couple people wanting to invest after they seen that I was, what I was doing. And I was like, I'd love to have your money. I'd really love to have your money. But this is not going to help as far as my proof of concept. I want to prove that it can be done on a shoestring budget. Because if I can do it on a shoestring budget and make it work, then that's more proof of concept. Yeah. So, this year, actually last year, we started to actually profit in the business or the building itself. So the building has its own separate business attached to it. And we rented out offices because there's separate office space. I actually rent 3 offices from the building business itself for my businesses, for 3 of my businesses, but we have other renters as well. So last year was the first year that it actually made a profit, but that we started. I got the keys in January of 2018, and it was a hot mess. So we've spent. I can only
imagine how much
so
bankers left it.
Yeah, it was, well, it has sat empty for a couple of years too. So, and it had not been updated, and, the heat didn't work. When we first got the building, we were paying $600 a week in propane costs for it to just not be frozen in here, just like the water wouldn't freeze, but it still was cold. You would have a heater up to your feet. You'd be bundled up like you were outside because the heating system had not been updated in forever. So it was bad. There was moments where like, it's a wonder my husband didn't kill me, because he was my labor for a lot of the things I didn't know how to do, like the boiler system. He'd be down there beating his head against the wall of the boiler system at 1 a.m. sometimes, trying to get it to work again. And you'd have to get on there, work on it every 2 to 3 days just to keep it not frozen in there. It was so bad at the beginning. So you could use the same concepts within any business. We have those times in the beginning of our businesses where we do question if we're making the right decision, that we do question, is this even working? Because even if there's money coming in, maybe it's just enough to keep it not frozen, right? So, I think that it was, normal, the steps that we went through, but I did have my moments where I wondered, like, did I make the right decision? Is this a terrible idea? And it wasn't until last year I was like, okay, this is going to work. Okay. My proof of concept will happen. I started really, I guess I believed in myself the whole time. We always have a piece of ourselves where we wonder, are we making the right decision?
The little voice in the back of your head, like, that you have to quiet out.
Yeah. So, and I've not made the right decisions on stuff. Like, I decided to open a boutique one time. That was freaking the worst idea. Like, that was, like, looking back, that was one of my ideas. Like, what the hell was I thinking? Because I don't know how to run a boutique. I like a cute outfit, but I am not the most fashionable person. Half the time, I barely brush my hair, and it's just not me. So it was just hilarious that I even tried to do that. But, it definitely was a learning experience too. And I think that's a big thing, is that, taking whatever decision it is that you've made and pulling out what was good from it, what wasn't, and always using that as learning to move forward. We're always learning. And I think as long as you're always learning, then that is successful.
I love it. I love how you define success as always learning and never sitting down on your laurels or going after the money. It's like, how can this make me smarter? How can this make me a better entrepreneur, a better business owner, or even a better person overall? So that, I love that definition of success. I want to ask you, because you mentioned one of the questions is, what is your first or favorite failure? And I'm guessing the boutique would be probably either your favorite failure or...
I've got a lot. It's like, which is my favorite? I don't know.
What lesson? How about this? What is one of the best lessons you learned from one of your failures?
I think the biggest lesson that I've had to learn is that more is not better. And I think it's something I say to people now. And the reason I say it is because it's something I had to learn. I always, anytime I would make a failure, no matter what it is, even like going back to my teenage years on some things that I consider failures that were really just a part of my own learning experience in life, I always tried to come out of that by proving myself and just doing more, because I screwed that up. So now I got to do like even more. If I do even more, then I can, I guess, outrun what I felt inside was my failure. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't work like that. You have to look at any failure as a lesson. It really is a lesson. And you may have made some different decisions, and you may have wished some things went different or whatever. But all in all, everybody I've ever talked to at this point always says the same thing, that they would not actually take back any of those things, not in reality, because it led them to their next thing. And that's actually really true with me. And a lot of these things I tried to outrun my entire life. It was ridiculous. I was trying to outrun them anyway, because was it a part of my life? Yeah, it was a part of my life. Did I wish I'd made a different decision? There's been plenty of times I did, but at this point now, I'm glad for every decision that I've ever made. I'm even glad for the things that have happened to me that were horrible and terrible, which makes me sound insane. But the reason that I am glad for those things is I would not be who I am today if I had not had the traumas I've gone through in my life. I would not be who I am today if I had not even made my own bad decisions and been able to learn things from them. So, all in all, I'm actually happy for every failure kind of along the way. So, I think that's been my biggest lesson, though, is that you really need to look at it as a lesson and figure out what the next move is, the next move for whatever, you're wanting your direction of your life to go. And that you don't have to, I guess, earn your way out of a failure. You don't have to earn your way out of something that you didn't think was a great decision. You just say, well, that was a stupid decision, and move on and make your decisions from there. And I think that's been the biggest thing for me, because I've done it. If you kind of look historically over my life, even a lot of the successes that I've had, that was because I was chasing it, because I was trying to prove myself because of something else. And, I'm glad for them. I'm glad for the successes too, but I wish that my why had been different while I was chasing it.
Ooh, I like that. Making sure that your why is aligned with who you are. That's a lesson I think a lot of the entrepreneurs that I've interviewed have stated. And reading up on entrepreneurs, it's like you need to find your why. Your why needs to be solid, core value that you enjoy. I love podcasting. I love helping people make podcasting because I think it's an amazing tool, not only to network, but to learn from, because you get these master classes of like 30 to 45 minutes or even an hour when you have these experts talking that could cost you up to $10,000, to listen to, but you have this hour worth of their time and all they're asking for is a few minutes. So that's why I love creating podcasts and interviewing amazing entrepreneurs like yourself who have hands in different pies, building, trying to help rural towns with you're like, I'll do it. No one else is doing it. I'll do it. And here you are building that amazing business and proof of concept. Now you've come into podcasting within the last few years, right?
Yeah, I put out my first podcast February of 2020.
So just before COVID, very huge launch time. And
yeah, it was a really weird thing for me. That it did not go the way I'd planned it, but nothing did last year.
Nothing usually goes well of 2020. But now you came in it with a business mindset, which is different than most podcasters. And most podcasters get into it for the, hobbyist and with the idea that, eventually I'll make money. You looked at podcasting as, hey, I want to make money as run it like a business. Now, being someone so new to the industry, what things have you noticed that are lacking with podcasts?
It's funny that I knew nothing about podcasting. Like I jokingly, and you've heard me say this, I call myself an accidental podcaster, because even though I planned on starting the podcast, it was because I had been doing speaking engagements before that. And just kind of going backwards a little bit, 2019 was actually my worst year. 2018, 2019 was just terrible in my personal life. Business wise, it was going great for a while. And then my personal life was falling into pieces. So I had been doing a lot of speaking engagements, and my personal life had started to calm down. I was in some therapies, and me and my husband were in marriage counseling. Long story that I'm not going to waste your time with right now. But, it came to the point that I didn't want to do as many speaking engagements, which I guess in retrospect was a great idea since COVID shut them all down. But, I decided 2020, when I made my 2020 plan, I thought, you know what, I'm not going to do a bunch of speaking engagements. I need to really focus on my family, focus on my local business, focus on finishing this building. Like I'd made my 2020 year to really fine tune some other things more locally and not be driving to Manhattan every other week or flying to Manhattan. I wasn't driving to Manhattan, flying to Manhattan every other week, to be able to do something. So I had already come up with this idea, and it came from somebody else actually at a speaking engagement. They said, you should start a podcast. I was like, okay. I had no idea what I was doing. And like you mentioned, I started like a business, which is what I did know was business. I thought, okay, well, what can I use this for? To me, it made sense. It's like, okay, well, just like a speaking engagement, I'm creating value. I'm teaching on a subject. I can also bring in other people to help teach on a subject. And my idea from that was just creating value to be able to, honestly, lead gen, to be able to meet people, to be able to show the value, to have people reach out to ask questions, to be able to, push some things in my own business. So that was the first reason that I decided to start it. But what it ended up happening was it also became very therapeutic for me, because again, I was in therapy at that point. First time I had ever been in therapy, because I ran from therapy my whole life, another story for another day.
Same here.
So, I was healing from a lifetime of traumas, and at the same time that I'm given this microphone, right? Microphone to be able to kind of do what I want to because I'm the one funding the bill. Nobody hired me in and gave me a script. So there was something that ended up happening during that time that I did start it like a business with a goal in mind to be able to use it as lead gen. And you can hear it at the very beginning episodes that I recorded that it was very business minded, and which is nothing wrong with that. But then you can also hear when it changed to Maria's therapy session. And then you can hear as it kind of became a combination of both, because what accidentally happened during that time was honestly more than I ever could have planned for. Is it has been a lead generation. I do believe every podcast should be ran like a business. I believe anything that you do, if it has a potential of creating dollars, needs to be run like a business. But podcasting became even more because it allowed me to fully heal. It really did. And you can actually listen and be able to hear all that. But it allowed me to tap into other people while I was being vulnerable, which was not a plan. That was never my plan, to be as vulnerable as I ended up being and share every single detail of all the things I'd hid my entire life. But what happened as I cringed after I recorded those episodes and released them, by the way, is that made me vulnerable enough that I ended up with so many people reaching out to me saying, me too, saying, I'm so glad you said that, with allowing me to kind of be able to merge my personal world with my business world, which is something that I had wanted to do for so long because I was driving myself insane trying to keep them all in these separate boxes, and they kept just leaking into each other, and I was driving myself crazy trying to keep this one over here and this one over here. And I spent most of my time trying to keep my world separate when in reality there was no real way to do that, and I was wasting time, resources, mental energy, trying to do something that was actually ridiculous to do in the first place. And, I had already kind of started coming into that journey, which is why it's titled Successfully Chaotic, but I didn't realize how much I wasn't fully even understanding what I was even preaching about at first until I really kind of got into that journey of really speaking with other people. And I think a lot of podcasters, no matter what the genre, even if it's something that's entertainment based, you can still hear, if you listen from the beginning, as they mature, because they come into their own voice, they come into their own story, and they come into their own why. And I know we talked about that a couple of times on here, but why is the most important thing to me on everything. And even clients I work with in my marketing company, they probably get annoyed with how often I ask them, but why? But why?
Like
Let's figure out why.
2-year-old child. Why? Just why?
Yeah, exactly. But you need to do that because, there's a lot of reasons why, and a lot of times the surface reasons why aren't the real reasons. We don't even realize that. Like the surface reasons, we barely scrape the surface of our why, at the beginning of starting anything most of the time. And so you have to kind of keep digging down to ask yourself why. And, I've always been, I'm slightly hyperactive. It's not a shock for most people to learn that. I'm self-diagnosed ADHD. I know it's a shock. You're probably like, what? No, I am.
For weeks, I've never noticed.
I am. And that could be, again, used for good or evil on that. But, I've always been a jumper because of that. Most people are hyperactive. We're very impulsive. It's like, oh, okay, let's do it. And that's good and bad, because there's the other side where I've seen people sit on something amazing for like 5 years and never do anything with it because they're afraid to try and fall on their face. So, again, it's a spectrum. For me, I've always been a jumper. I'm more of a hesitant jumper now because once you've been, burnt a few times or fell on your face, that you do need to put yourself through some of these questions. And one of the biggest ones I ever ask myself, and I don't immediately jump anymore, I make myself wait. I have like the cooling down period, figuring out, okay, well, why am I wanting to do this? Why? And I have to ask myself that more than one time because, it might look like, oh, this is a great opportunity. That's not a why. That's not a real why. Great opportunity. Why is it a great opportunity? And why do we want this opportunity? And what is going to come from that opportunity? And why do we want that? So there's so many levels to it. And I think a lot of people end up only hitting those first levels. And I think that's where a lot of these podcasters, they start their podcast because of, one small why, but they don't realize that there's other whys underneath that because, maybe they feel the need to be heard, or maybe they feel like they've been silent in their own life, or maybe, there's so many deep underlying whys to the reasons that we decide to do something that sometimes we don't even know them all. And we have to be very conscientious on asking ourselves these questions.
No, I agree with you. A lot of podcasters don't have that why. Like I remember when I started my first show, the Phil Better show, I just wanted to be famous. That my why was let's become famous. And obviously with that podcast, I didn't become famous.
So
But
close.
so close. I got really close. But it gave me all the tools necessary to start this podcast. And the reason I started this one was I never had an entrepreneur in my life, or the normal entrepreneur, if you will, like the image that I had similar to yours, where you didn't know you were an entrepreneur when you were marketing yourself as a trainer and that. So my whole life, I didn't have that. I had only 9-to-5ers. And I knew about, like Bill Gates, he was successful, Warren Buffett successful, all those. And I'm like, okay, I have to do something like that. And then having talked to now, I think I'm over close to 70 entrepreneurs by now, I've learned that, no, I'm an entrepreneur. I have a business in this podcasting world, and teaching people, showing people, and just interviewing people is a business unto itself. So the why is like the most important. Why are you starting your podcast? Why do you want it to be successful? And I think having you reiterate the why is so important. It's going to be like the headline, the Maria Daniels, the why. Will be the name. The why.
Yeah.
But I want to know, you've interviewed a lot of different people on your Successful Chaotic. I have been a guest as well, which I'm always thankful for. But who has been maybe one of your favorite guests? And like, I'm not saying it's your favorite, but one guest that you feel that if we had to listen to one episode because of that guest, which one would it be?
That's a really hard question. You know, it's really sad. I never listened back to my own podcast.
It's fine. I only listen once when I'm editing, so I understand.
Stacy will be like, "Oh, an episode this, and season this, episode this, you did this." I was like, "Oh, I did? Okay." I have no idea. I know that goes against like the podcaster creed or something. I've been like scolded by every podcaster out there, and again, like I'm not saying it's the right way to do it. You know, I can see benefits to listening to them. But I'll be honest, I don't have the time nor the mental capacity to sit and listen to myself talk, and so I just don't. I'm trying to think of guests, which
okay,
all of them.
How about this? We'll switch it up. Who is a guest that you would love to have on your podcast? Could be past, present, future, famous, non-famous, anybody. Who would you want to be able to sit down and interview with?
I feel like I should have read your questions.
Yeah, that would have made this interview a lot different.
That would have made it a lot better. There's some things I'm not good at, and that's one of them. Let's see. There's lots of things I'm not good at. I don't know. That's so hard. You know, I guess I can say I don't get hung up, which goes against a lot of other podcasters. I'm not saying this is right.
You're successfully
chaotic
podcast.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's I don't get hung up in if they're famous or not. Which I know the reasons, I know the ratings, I know the blah, 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 blah. But for me, I don't care about that. I like to hear, it's more of a type. I want the underdogs. I want the people that, have clawed their way to their idea of success. And I don't care if that's $1 bajillion. I don't care if that's, hey, they made their rent. I don't care what their idea of success is. That doesn't matter to me.
Their success can be whatever it
their
is.
Success. Because I think so often, and I fell in this myself. I was chasing somebody else's idea of success, which was the title, the house, the car, the money, the things, and those aren't bad. There's nothing wrong with them, but to me, that's not my idea of happy. So why was that my idea of success? Because I'm just as happy being in the woods with nothing. Mm-hmm. I actually am more comfortable. I am an outdoor person. I love to be outside. I have nice things. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you was to ask me what my idea of happy is, it's not those things. Like we still live in a normal house. It's a nicer normal house, but it's still a normal house. I don't get hung up on a lot of the things that a lot of people do. Again, everybody has to make their decisions for them. So, but I guess it would be the people that have reached their idea of what they think success is, with their idea of happy, but have gone through a journey that is maybe less than perfect. And the reason I like those people, I talk to other people too, but the reason I like those people so much is because, well, number one, I am that person, but number two, whenever I was going through some of my struggles, and I couldn't find a good example of somebody that was like me. I would listen, and maybe they were, but they hadn't really owned their entire story, or at least not, to the world. So I would listen and we all compare ourselves, whether we realize and admit we do, we all do. So I would listen to this stuff, this, successful, female entrepreneur. I would listen to their story and their journey and even their idea struggles. And I'd be like, oh, that would be like a day in the park if that was my struggles, and I kept just trying to find these examples, and I was still running full force toward, again, somebody else's idea of success. And I would trip and fall and trip and fall. Life would happen. It would never fail. And I'd get almost there. It's almost like those movies that you see where you're like running to the door, you get almost there, but the door is like farther and farther and farther away. It would always be something. It would, a kid would get sick, and, I would have to miss this really important meeting, or, just something else, would just go wrong. And I kept thinking, maybe this is not for me. Maybe this journey is not for me. Maybe, I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not this enough. Maybe I'm not that. And I would listen to this stuff trying to find, really some encouragement to keep going, because I didn't want to quit, which, I do want a disclaimer here. Sometimes there's very good reasons to quit things. Very good reasons. Don't go with this, grind and hustle and never quit. I think that's bullshit. There's times to grind. There's times to hustle. There's times to not quit. There's also times where you stop, you rest, and you quit. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that. But for me,
I agree with that, like taking a moment, reassess the environment, see if it's worthwhile continuing down. Is it closer to your goal? No, then exit. It's not going to bring you the happiness or the success that you want. So.
Absolutely, because I think a lot of times we do more damage to ourselves, to our pocketbook, to all the things by hanging on to something that's not the right fit for us. So, I do think there's times, but for me, I'm glad I didn't quit during these times, but I almost did so many times, because I was getting exhausted with running full force. And it felt like, not only would I trip, but I would like fall down a ravine and burst into flames and be clawing up the other side. And I would just look for just an anchor, something to kind of tether onto, just to kind of give me the willpower to go on. And I couldn't find anything that was like me, which, I know there's lots of people. I've talked to lots of people now that, have similar stories to mine even. But I couldn't find very, very many examples of that. And, for me, that was one of the reasons that I decided to really stop hiding from the pieces of my life that I wanted to forget, the pieces of my life where I wish I had made different decisions, the pieces of my life where people hurt me, the pieces of my life that were messy and ugly and scarred and, wasn't something you would normally be like, here, look at this. This is what I did, type of thing. I decided I didn't care. I didn't care that somebody was going to judge me for part of it. I didn't care that sometimes people would pity me for other parts of it, because I feared both just the same. I didn't want to be pitied. I also didn't want to be judged. And, I spent so many years of my life worrying about how somebody was going to perceive my life that I was missing out on my life. So, the day that I decided I just didn't actually give a rat's ass what people, thought about it anymore, that I was just going to own my journey, because it was my journey. It was nobody else's. And was the day that really I felt like it sounds kind of corny, but I felt like I was actually freed from all of it. That it wasn't, I wasn't chained down to all the stuff that I had to try to keep everybody from knowing all the time, because I was out there saying it. And I know my mom listened to a couple episodes and she was like, oh, it's on iTunes, Maria. Why would you say that on iTunes? I'm like, well, I put it on iTunes. I want it on iTunes, But to me, my why behind that was to heal. And part of my healing was the not caring what people thought. But also the other part was to be what I couldn't find, to be that person out there that if somebody else is like going through the muck of life, because let's face it, life is beautiful and amazing, but sometimes it also sucks. Yep. There is days that freaking suck. I don't care. That doesn't make you a negative person to say today sucks, that today you just want it to go to hell, because you're going to have those days. Being a positive person doesn't mean you're positive 100% of the time. I consider myself a very positive person. I love my life, but I also have those days where I'm like, I freaking quit and I hate everything and everyone. And that is okay to have those feelings. You can still be a positive person. So I wanted to be that person that was able to be there to say, that's okay that you feel that way. That's okay that you've been through this, that, and the other. That's okay that you made that mistake, but it's also okay that you've had these successes, because there is both sides of it. I've had successes, but I didn't want to overshadow the part that led me to the successes, which was all the rest of it.
I love it. I love it. Maria, this is a question, or we're coming to the final two questions that I normally ask. They're not on the questionnaire, so everybody doesn't know what it is, but you didn't read the questionnaire, so it's fine. So I could lie and everybody would be aware of this. What is one lesson you want my listeners to take away from listening to this whole thing? You probably, I don't want to say it's the why, but what is another lesson, or what is that core message you want to at least tell the people who are listening?
That there's no such thing as a perfect journey. There's no such thing as a perfect life. And, that's the reason I have the title Successfully Chaotic, because everybody's life is chaos. Everybody's life has good parts, bad parts, crazy parts, funny parts. Just think of your favorite movie. It's got all the things in it, unless the movie sucks. So, part of a full life is all the things. And, that's not going to look perfect. So stop, looking at these glossed over versions of stuff on Instagram and Pinterest and all those things. And I like those have a purpose. I like looking at the beautiful photos, but don't let their highlights of their life make you feel worse about the messy parts of yours, because guaranteed they have messy parts. So, and I think that's the biggest thing, because it's so easy to do that. And it's so easy to get, hung up on what other people think. And, it's not like I want people to hate me. I don't want people to hate me, but I also can't let somebody else's idea of who I am or what I should do and shouldn't do define what I actually do. So I think those are the biggest things.
I love it. It's a great lesson to take away from this episode. And now this is more for me. I'm a voracious book reader, and you having a cafe that also has some books for sale there. What is one book you think entrepreneurs or someone thinking about getting into the world of entrepreneurship should read? It doesn't necessarily have to be about entrepreneurship, but it could have some lessons that could help entrepreneurs.
There's a lot of them. I know I really liked Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm sure everybody says that one, because that one's a big one.
There's been only one other person who said Rich Dad, Poor Dad, so you're fine.
Okay, well, that's a big one, because I read that. I was like, it's funny. The biggest moments are the ones that are so common sense. You're like, somehow we should have known that, but we didn't, and so that one's one of them. Another one is I really like, I bought it just because I mentioned earlier, I like underdogs. I've always said underdogs. Mm-hmm. And then I seen this book titled The Underdog Advantage by Dean Graziosi. And I was like, I got to read that because I'm for the underdog, woo woo, And it was actually a really good book. I bought it mainly because I was like, underdogs. I am for the underdog. But it was really eye-opening and really did a great job of even explaining things I didn't even know why I really wanted to represent the underdog. But I just knew that I did because I was one. And I really like that one's a good one too, because I think you run into a lot of people who's like, well, I can't do that because of this. Well, I can't do that because of this. And, my life is crazy. If there's 1,000 reasons that I shouldn't have ever been able to do any of the things that I do. So don't let your idea of what, an entrepreneur looks like, or a podcaster looks like, or whatever your big goal, big why is. Don't look at your life and think that you can't do it, because you can do anything. So I really like that. Those are some good books.
Awesome. I love it. Maria, I'm going to jump off screen for a second. I'm going to give you time to let everybody know where they can find you, where they can listen to your podcast, and if they want to reach out and work with you, or maybe have a one-on-one chat to get better. So it's all yours.
Well, all right. So you can find my podcast, all the podcast places. It's called Successfully Chaotic. We're on all the social media under Successfully Chaotic as well. And Reset Business Consulting is my marketing company, so you can find me through there. We do a few other live shows that stream to our Facebook and YouTube channels. So yeah, if you want to reach out for a one-on-one, I know there's some calendar links on my social media. I think in my IG bio, where you can schedule just a one-on-one. I do free discovery calls, chats. I'm big on doing that. I will disclaimer myself though, I don't take on every client. I'm pretty picky on who I work with for different things that I have, because there's only 24 hours in a day, and I want to make sure that we both are getting what we need from the situation. But I do all the discovery calls. So
Excellent. Yes, and of course, all the notes, all the links, and that will be in the show notes down below, so that you can reach out to Maria or her business and see if you're a perfect fit. But also listen to her podcast, specifically the one with me on, because I think I was the best guest.
You were really good.
But yes, Maria, I want to thank you again for being a guest on the show. You've provided a great resource for the underdogs. I feel this is a very underdog episode and somewhat similar to my story of trying to start my own business. So I want to thank you for being a guest and investing your time with us here at the show. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, invest in yourself. Hey, I want to thank you so much for listening to the episode. I had such a great time talking with our guest. Now, I have one simple favor to ask of you. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a family member or a close friend so that they can learn from this amazing entrepreneur. I thank you so much for being a fan of the show and just being an amazing human being. And I can't wait to see you guys on the flip.
Thanks for tuning in. Now it's time to take the next step. When you're ready to dive deeper into how to launch, grow, and monetize your podcast, Phil's got something special for you. Join him for a free webinar where he'll reveal the 3 secrets that have helped countless entrepreneurs succeed in podcasting. Click the link in the show notes to save your spot, and let's turn your podcasting dreams into reality.